This entire episode felt like getting broken up with at Applebee's. Like, even if there's hot food to look forward to after the breakup, it's still microwave mozzarella sticks that have already congealed. Ooh. I'm so mad. Hi, hello everyone, my name is Jer, and I am not having a Baja blast. I am having a Baja bad time. Everything is awful. Why do I look like I'm about to throw like a level 2 Caterpie at you on Route 5? We're going to be getting into Canada's Drag Race Season 6, Episode 8 today. And boy is it a doozy. Today's episode is themed after charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. The way I feel about this challenge is the exact same way that I feel about the Snatch Game Rusical from Canada vs. the World Season 2. I like what it wanted to be and I like the composition of it, but then just the mechanics of it did not work out, I think, the way that it could have. And my harshness about this episode is not indicative of how I feel about the rest of the season. I think one kind of sloppy episode amongst several really high episodes doesn't make the season bad, but it certainly just sets up the semifinal as being a little bit of a womp womp. The storylines were frustrating and left me feeling unresolved as an audience member, and I think I just did not enjoy the general composition of how each one of these challenges were laid out. As a concept, the idea of doing 4 challenges seems compelling and interesting, but when it gets right down to the nitty-gritty of it, I don't think this created the right amount of tension that it was supposed to. And that had a lot to do with the general challenge composition. I think the intentionality of this was to find 4 distinct challenges in Drag Race. Lip syncing, which is pivotal to the show, a monologue, which is only done every couple of seasons, design challenge, and then a almost rusical light challenge. Blend all those into one thing and then raise the stakes higher than they've ever been before. Make it bracket style where every single time that a challenge starts, someone will proceed and then everyone else gets left behind. I think the idea of that is interesting when you stretch it out over several episodes. It's why All Stars 10 as a concept generally works. But when you put that into episodic format, it just doesn't have the right... I don't know why I'm doing the Italian hands. Maybe it's because my mom took way too much Tylenol before having me, but I am restructuring this entire challenge. The way I would rebuild this entire thing from the ground up is to make it Mario Party meets Miss Hairspray pageant style. Make each one of these challenges points-based. You get a certain amount of stars depending on how you place, and whoever's got the most amount of stars at the very end of it progresses.
1 + 2 + 1.
So charisma starts out, you do a monologue. Uniqueness, do the design challenge exactly as it showed up. Nerve, I think that would have worked perfectly for that rap challenge. And then make the talent portion the actual talent show, but a light version. Sort of like what they did in Down Under 1. And the people with the least amount of points have to lip sync in the ultimate semifinal SmackDown. Because I think the general structure of these didn't quite work out the way that they were intended to. When I think charisma, my first thought is not necessarily lip syncing. And I get where they wanted to go with this challenge. Showmanship and personality is pivotal for winning Drag Race, but a lip sync doesn't deliver that. A monologue, however, does, which was already baked into the challenge. And I think ultimately the reason why it landed here is because they needed 5 parts to do the tribute to Canada's Drag Race. Loved that. Someone put their entire pussy into that. It was everything else that got a little left to the wayside. The cold open starts with Ebony thinking that Caramilk was doing an apple because French people eat apples. She is so cinnamon roll coated. Any of my Tumblr gays and girlies, you know what I'm talking about. And there's an overarching narrative of Caramilk feeling defeated, feeling this unsupportiveness that carried over from last week that is left entirely unresolved. She gets a little bit of connection with some of the others in the room, of them reaffirming her. She's fought her way to be here. She deserves her place. But then it leaves on this sour spot of her going home where I don't think it was necessarily justified. Caramilk teed up so much story for them in the beginning with her frustration with the others. This was an easy story to follow. She might as well have drawn them a map with an X on it. So how did the producers on the ground miss so hard? Do I think that Semi should have gone home? Absolutely not. And I want to make it clear before I start all this, I am not a PM hater at all, but when we look at the track record of everyone that is here, Caramilk's track record is stronger. I would have wanted to see her in the finale more. Brooke comes in looking like an extra for the Kimagure Princess music video. and tells the contestants about the challenge, and then everything goes a little off the rails timeline-wise. Challenge 1, the C portion, begins that exact same day. They all get in drag and go straight to the main stage, where Brooke is out of drag. They do this bangin' homage to the past 5 seasons, which was my favorite part of the entire episode. It set such a cool bar of what to expect, and then everything after that just was less exciting. And I watch Drag Race because I love a competition and I want to see competition progress, but I also like the TV of it all. And I fear that the TV wasn't that exciting. The timing only continues to get weirder because it seems like possibly the next day they start their design challenge. They do their runways, and then they have to do 2 more challenges afterwards. They crammed so much content into what we perceived as one day that everything from this point forward feels like a speed run to get it all over with rather than adequately pacing it. And I hate when an episode of TV comes across as hurried. Leaping back to the charisma portion, the challenge reminded me a lot of that cut runway challenge that the season 5 girls had to do. I love how the international seasons celebrate their alumni, and I wish that Mainline and All Stars would do that more. This challenge is actually kind of what I thought the Snatch Game Rusical was going to be. Pull these iconic clips from past Snatch Game performances and make them lip sync to it. All of these cuts from season 1, your lace line looks like barf. Honey, this is Christmas, baby. The cuts from season 2 that I got to trick up my sleeve. Doing Jada Shada Hudson's entire got her booty hole blown out by a ghost monologue were all so fun to reminisce over, but then the modern seasons 4 and 5 seemed hastily and unequally created to the previous ones. They were like bullet points in comparison, it felt like. Of all of these performances, I think that Caramel had the most personality. I love the way that she punched each one of the lines, and I loved her characterization of changing the vibe between each character she was lip syncing about. I think Ebony did a really solid job right after Caramel. And then I think PM landed right about the middle, with Van Gogh coming in about 4th, and then with Sammy in that 5th place spot. It's not that Sammy or Van did bad at all. They did quite well. Van's segment was just as short as PM's, if not shorter, which was odd. But I think that she performed very well. And I think that Sammy was interesting, but I think the others were more. PM won this challenge, officially affirming that this is the spicy sunshine of this season. A lot of these seasons love to have a redemptive moment for someone that is not doing traditionally well in a competition. And they sort of give them this last second win to make them more viable as an underdog player to maybe snatch the crown. And while PM's underdog story has been building the last few weeks, Caramel's underdog story had just as much attention, if not more, since hers was slightly more recent, where PM was a bit on the back burner the last 2 challenges, at least in an editing standpoint. And once more, Caramel sets up so much story for them this week, even having her back and forth with Van about giving them a run for their money in the Uniqueness challenge. I do not know if this was PM's redemption story episode, but I don't know if PM would have knocked out any of the following challenges other than the lip sync at the very end. If they wanted PM in the finale badly, this was the time to give them a win, because Uniqueness was not where it was gonna happen, and Nerve probably wasn't where it was gonna happen either. But this is why it all should have been points-based. And so the other 4 queens progress on to Uniqueness, which is to design an outfit. When Brooke announced that it was a design challenge, Van smiled like the Grinch who was just about to head down into Whoville, and it was adorable low-key. The queens are given identical ugly dresses,
you ugly bitch,
that looked like rouged jersey. Barf. How are we supposed to slay in these trying times, in these ugly outfits? I think the trick with a challenge like this is trying to navigate transformation. How do you take something ugly and make it fierce? And during this time, the edit took a lot of story beats to give us more progression between Ebony and Caramel, between Sammy and Van, with PM. And I think these story moments were important, and they helped me understand these players a little bit better and make me root for them a little more. But it also doubled down on my frustration that Caramel went home this week. She had such a strong story, even down to the runway, only to get left in the dust. That was so sad and devastating to me. I felt like Kim K sobbing, staring at my TV screen. Brooke this week accidentally twinning with Caramel in week 1 was everything. This got me feeling like Caramel's win was about to pick up again. When Brooke accidentally twinned with Melinda Verga, she won that week. So I thought maybe the same would happen for my diva here. If I had a nickel for every time that Brooklyn Heights accidentally twinned with someone's outfit from earlier in the season, I'd have 2 nickels. That's not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. She looked like a golden statue and it was so hot. Ebony is first out on the runway looking super sporty, which I think is very on brand with her. It was like athletic, but what if the theme was sluts? You ever heard of athleisure? Get ready for thoughtletic. This was such a lip sync look, which I think is very in line with Ebony's style. I love that glittery fabric over the black dress, and I think she transformed it well. It was very smart, it was in her wheelhouse, and it looked well made. And then that silvery trim on the neckline was such a good color pop. It caught my eye. Sammy is out next, kinda wearing trash. This look was nuts. It's very her, but why is it so ugly? Also, where was her forehead? It was the anti-Tyra Banks, who has like a 6 head. This was like a 2 head. From where your eyebrows end to where your hairline starts, it should be 4 fingers. But Sammy was like 1.5 or 2. This was such a go-home dress. It's literally just animal print draped with some black fabric tacked onto it, which does not meet the brief of the challenge to transform that ugly little black dress. But it also wasn't unique either. It was something that you would definitely want to throw away. Cara Milk is out next looking super regal, and I agreed with the judges when they brought it up. It looked a lot like her last design challenge look. If you've got a style that you like, stick to it, but you've got to show some variety. I thought using the dress as trim was a brilliant idea, but it is the same problem that Sammy had. It wasn't transformative. It wasn't anything new, and the judges wanted something new. I love that she leaned into her brand and was just being authentically her. Sharing a story on the runway is always important, and I love that Serene acknowledged that the dress may have not been unique, but she is. Serene was really the only one who saw her, truly saw her. And this story keeps getting teased for Cara Milk's redemption this episode to prove that she earned her spot in the finale this far into the competition. But it literally goes nowhere. Van Gogh is next in this plaid fantasy that I loved in Still. It is so editorial the way that it has been constructed. I like the hip shape while it's standing, but I didn't like it in motion because it's a little stiff. But Van is so damn talented at sewing, and this color palette was tasty. Roxy Andrews moved out of the way because if you give Van a sewing challenge, she's gonna do it right. I think Van might be the only contestant in history that won 3 of the exact same type of challenge, which was all sewing. That is impressive. For Nerve, they have to deliver a monologue. Again, I think this could have been the charisma challenge, but I understand for time constraint purposes and the amount of lines that they had, I get why they did it this way. I would have just liked it if everyone participated. I think that would have been the most fair thing for everyone. What do you mean you do not have to participate in every segment of this semifinal challenge? This wasn't the tension building slay I think they thought it was. Even thinking back into my memory banks of that quick challenge they had to do in Drag Race UK Season 3 where they had 45, 30, and 15 minutes to do each challenge, they still each had to participate in each segment. This challenge had promise, it just didn't deliver fully. Ebony was giving me heart, soul, vulnerability, this connection through the camera beyond just what she was saying that connected with me. And she clearly connected with the judges too. Being in that room must have been electric because that was everything. She was so soft and gentle. Allowing all this frustration that has been building up since her friendship with Van was sort of called into question last week, and the emotional conversation this week to just play out on the stage. That moment where she looks down and then softly looks back up at the judges, that I think is where she locked in the win. And everything she was saying sounded like it came naturally out of her mouth, like she was just speaking these words for the first time, not thinking about them at all, not reading them off a teleprompter, whatever option they had to get these lines fed to them. Cara Milk, I think, also came off really genuinely and natural, but I think her cadence of speaking didn't give the same amount of heart that Ebony's had. It was a little more rehearsed. Whereas Sammy, I think, did a good job at infusing her own humor into the monologue. That small flourish of comedy was so uniquely her, but was it what this particular challenge called for? Because the monologue was not funny. If the monologue was about red slippers that you got when you were 6, I don't know, maybe you could add humor into that. Ebony won this for me. I think she does such a great job at owning her space, and she won it for the judges as well, which I then let out a big, deep sigh of relief because that means Ebony's moving on to the finale. But then I got worried because Caramilk has this story that she feels unseen by everyone in the room. And that bled into the last portion, which also makes me feel bad. So talent is the last segment. And again, I feel like this could have been a traditional talent show, but maybe more condensed. In this round, Sammy and Caramilk have to lip sync to Fix You. I was locked in. Caramilk was serving unbelievable, astronomical levels even of I think they were both great in their own ways, but I was focused on Caramilk and everything that she did. I love me some Sammy, and she was my original pick for top 4, but so was Caramilk. So to see Caramilk go home, I was very upset. Because this rough story that carried from last week into this week never gets finished. Maybe the intention is that she comes back for an All-Stars way later on down the road and finally gets to be seen by the judges, almost in a way that Tainomi was looking for when she came back for Canada versus the World. But then the judges still overlooked her and did not give her her flowers because she just wasn't doing it well enough or enough at all. This whole episode felt like getting broken up at Applebee's. It doesn't matter that you've got hot food to look forward to after you've been broken up with. It's still mozzarella sticks that have been microwaved and totally congealed by the time that you get to eat them. I think the goal of this episode clearly was to build excitement and tension as the contestants get scooted forward each round. We're sort of holding our breath waiting for the next one. But I think they could have achieved this just as well by fine-tuning the progression of challenges, rewarding stars multiple times in each challenge, and then we slowly see their scores go up. They're all still competing with each other. Everyone participates in every single segment. And this challenge sort of tanked the track record of Sammy in particular. She sticks true to herself and she gives her every time. But does she have all of the wind in the same way that someone like Van or Ebony does? Making it so that Sammy is the last one through the ringer doesn't set her up as a viable winner. Even with PM having such a lousy track record up until now, having their redemption story in this episode finishes off their entire storyline. They aren't viable to win the crown either. Caramilk moving into the finale wasn't going to be the end of her story. It was the last push she needed to knock it out in that last episode. I think the cup is between either Van Gogh or Ebony, and it looks like the edit is doubling down that they are rivals and they will have this tension next week, making me think that Van will be the villain to Ebony, making the audience want to root for her to win that much more since the other finalists have zero shot essentially, and Drag Race loves a hero story. And so with next week being the finale, I am extremely nervous how this is all gonna pan out, but mostly feeling bummed that this semi-final episode did not have the same amount of pizzazz and punch that everyone that came before it had. And y'all, I think I'm just really devastated that Caramilk is gone. But what y'all think about this challenge? Let me know in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win the whole thing? Because from where I'm sitting, it's going to Van or Ebony. If you haven't already checked out my reaction to the Drag Race UK versus the World Season 3 cast, that has already premiered. You can go check that out afterwards. And make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and leave a share. I enjoy content creation and I want to be able to keep doing it. And the only way I can do that is through y'all's support. So make sure to hit those buttons and I will see y'all on the flip.